I was folding tiny onesies when my son-in-law told me I had two choices, become his butler or pack my bag. He didn't even look at me when he said it, just stood at the sink in our Naperville townhouse, letting the dishwasher hum like a satisfied witness, while October rain stitched the window with cold threads. "Coffee at 6:30, Evan said, ticking off duties on his fingers. "Shoes shined, SUV gassed. If you're going to live here, you'll earn it." My daughter, Maya, held a burp cloth and stared at the grout line on the floor like the right answer might be hiding there. "Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from." "Earn it." I set down the onesie, smooth cotton shrinking in my hands. I'd paid their HOA dues twice this year, $384 in March, $384 in July. Painted the nursery in August and carried their spring property tax to the deadline. "Is this how you see me?" I asked Maya. She blinked hard, lips barely moving. "Please, Dad, just keep the peace." Here's the thing about peace. It costs. I wiped my hands on the dish towel, walked to the hall closet, and pulled out the scuffed grey suitcase I bought in 1999 when Lena and I visited Door County. The zipper teeth still held their bite. I folded 2 shirts, my shaving kit, and the pocket notebook where I track everything. Every receipt, every appointment, every promise. On the entry table, I laid the spare key on the little marble tray I'd given them for their wedding. The Ring camera blinked blue in the corner of my eye. He followed me to the door. "Don't drag this out," he said. It was the tone that gets used on delivery guys when a package is late, a tone that assumes the world works for you. "The world doesn't," I said. "And neither do I." The elevator smelled like wet umbrellas and someone's peppermints. In the mirrored wall, I saw what Evan saw, an old man in a frayed denim jacket, a man who moves slower now and grunts when he bends. But I also saw the man who put in 40 years supervising concrete pours in November wind, whose name is on a trust that holds this very roof. I didn't throw that in his face. Paper should do the talking, not pride. At the roadway on Ogden, $79 a night, a key card that worked on the second try, towels like thin promises. I set the suitcase open on the bedspread and sat. A minute ago I'd been tucking my grandson's socks into a drawer I'd built. Now the drawer was a closed mouth back at the house, and I was a guest in a room that smelled of lemon cleaner and past arguments. I took out my phone and scrolled my photos until I found the screenshot of the deed summary with Lena's name on the trust. I pinched it bigger, then smaller, as if that could resize the ache. I called Rita. "I need a clean path," I said. She didn't ask for drama. She asked for dates. October 23rd, I told her, in kitchen. Evan said, "Serve him or leave." I left. When I hung up, I lined my receipts on the motel desk like a short parade. The $412 grocery run I did the week of the baby shower, the pediatric copay I swiped my card for in August, the 2 HOA slips, crisp as little white flags. The ice machine coughed in the hall. I opened my notebook and wrote a line under today's date, Naperville, Wednesday rain, then underlined the sentence that steadied my hands. "Respect is the rent we pay to stay in each other's lives." I turned off the light, listened to the radiator hush like a secret, and let the house I owned keep its silence for one night. The motel ice machine coughed at 2 in the morning like it had a cold, and the sound went straight through the drywall and into my bones. I lay there with my forearm over my eyes and tried to remember the last thing Lena said to me about pride. "It's a coat, not armor," she'd laughed, folding laundry at our old kitchen table. "Wear it when you have to. Hang it up when you get home." I had a coat and no home. By 7, I was in the lobby pouring coffee into a paper cup that went soft around the rim. Naperville was all pewter sky and wet leaves, a Thursday that felt like a warning. I carried the cup back to the room, cleared the motel desk, and made an altar of paper, The $384 HOA receipt from March, the $384 from July, the baby shower grocery slip with $402 circled in blue pen, the pediatric copay for August. I underlined the dates the way foreman chalk lines before a pour, evidence before emotion, concrete before story. I called Maya at 8:11 a.m. It rang, then shifted to her voicemail, her voice soft and tired. "Leave it after the beep." After the beep, I said, "It's Dad. I'm safe. I'll give you space. We'll handle this with paper." The last sentence wasn't for her. It was for me. At 10, I walked to Alvarez Hardware on Washington. The bell over the door made the same. Two-note chime it's made since '97. "Morning, Mr. Allen," Mr. Alvarez said, then realized and corrected himself to, "Good morning, Ed." I bought a fireproof pouch for $49, a fresh black Sharpie and, because I could, 2 packets of those felt pads that keep chairs from scuffing floors. Habit. He slid the pouch across the counter and lowered his voice. "Saw. You leave with a suitcase last night," he said. "You okay?" I told him I'd be better once my papers were in order. He nodded the way men who've paid off mortgages nod, slow, respectful. I took the river walk the long way back, past geese, hissing like tiny guardsmen, past a boy in a red coat stomping puddles, while his mother laughed. I sat on a bench that smelled faintly of rain-swollen wood and wrote in my pocket notebook, Thursday, October 24th, roadway, coffee, fireproof pouch. Under that, I wrote a sentence I didn't dare say out loud. They turned me into staff in the house. I built for them. Then I crossed it out because it sounded like pity and replaced it with respect is rent. I won't pay where it isn't collected. At 1:32 p.m., my phone buzzed with a local number I didn't recognize. "This is Kendra from First Prairie Bank," a woman said, brisk, careful. "Mr. Allen, I'm calling about activity on the memorial. Card tied to your late wife's account." The words late wife still tilt the room. I gripped the phone tighter. "Go ahead," I said. "We're seeing 3 charges flagged by our system in the last 72 hours. A florist at $2,800, a private chef deposit at $1,975, and event rentals at $1,240. Each lists the billing address as your townhouse on Jefferson. Do you authorize?" I could hear the ice machine cough again, though the hall was quiet. "I do not," I said. "Please dispute and freeze. The card is not to be used." She asked me to confirm the memorial card's last 4 digits. I did. "We'll email you statements and a dispute form within the hour," she said. "I'll also notate the account that you suspect misuse." I thanked her by name. When we hung up, I put the phone on the desk like it might burn. There are moments when grief and anger line up so perfectly they look like one shadow. I sat very still and saw the florist's hinging glass door, the private chef's website with its copper pots and polite adjectives, the rental company's photo of gold-rimmed plates I recognized from Evan's bragging posts. I pictured him typing in Lena's memorial card number because it was handy, or because it felt like free money, or because he wanted to host something curated and thought legacy meant centerpieces. I breathed until the room stopped shrinking. I opened my laptop and created a folder called Thanksgiving, then hated the capitalization and changed it to Thanksgiving. Inside it, I saved Kendra's email when it landed, downloaded the PDFs, and printed them at the motel's front desk for 20 cents a page. Back in the room, I highlighted the merchant names and underlined the totals. The way my old site accountant taught me to mark change orders, you'll need the judge to notice. At 3:07 p.m., a text from Evan arrived. A photo of 2 crystal decanters and an artful stack of cookbooks captioned, "Legacy begins at this table." No punctuation, like a decree. I took a screenshot and slid my phone face down. 2 minutes later, another text. "If you plan to come crawling back, make it before the holiday, and we'll think about letting you stay." I didn't answer. I refuse to text a man who calls me staff. Around 5, the motel clerk slipped a takeout menu for a place on Ogden under my door. Gyros and fries for $8.99. I ate at the little table, the meat too salty, the fries perfect, and felt the day pushing its weight on my shoulders. When the sun finally punched through the cloud deck and threw an orange band across the carpet, something in me gave way. I went into the bathroom, turned on the fan, and cried into a folded towel so nobody could hear. It wasn't loud. It was long. When the tears were done, the work began. I stacked the receipts in the fireproof pouch, put the deed copy on top, slid in the HOA slips, tucked Kendra's emails behind them, and sealed the zipper like I was closing a small vault. Then I drew a box in my notebook and made a plan, like I'd make a schedule before winter. 1. Secure the house with paper. No locks until lawful. 2. Document past support. Rent credits, HOA, taxes. 3. File clean notices. No threats, just dates. 4. Reveal only when the room is full and the truth can't hide. I wrote one more line in block letters, red Sharpie dragged over black ink. Thanksgiving, November 27th. Family gathers, truth travels. I turned off the lamp and lay back on the bedspread, the fireproof pouch warm against my palm, and pictured the townhouse at dusk. The framed photo of Lena by the window, the baby monitor glowing like a small lighthouse in the nursery, the spare key I'd left on the marble tray. I whispered to the ceiling, paper over shouting, Len, and the radiator answered with its soft, steady hush. On October 27th, I traded motel coffee for the dry citrus smell of Rita's office. Lemon, oil, old paper, and quiet power. No yelling, she said as soon as I sat down, just paper. That's why I came to her. She handled Lena's estate like she was tuning a violin, every document precise. She read my notes, the receipts, the bank printouts. Your trust still owns the property? She asked. Free and clear, I said. Townhouse title sits in the Lena Allen Revocable Trust. They never signed a lease. It was a family arrangement. Rita nodded, typed fast. Then you serve a 30-day termination for cause, reason, disrespect and unauthorized use of funds. You stay lawful. They think they can shame you. You'll answer with envelopes. We drafted the notice together, 2 pages, language sharp enough to cut through excuses. She slid it across the desk. You sign here. Process server costs $95. In dollars. I wrote the check and felt lighter than I had in weeks. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through Evan's texts. Staff, butler, free room. Rita's eyebrow arched. Keep every word. Judges love plain English. Then I showed her the ring cam clip, Evan in his vest, bowing mockingly behind my back while I fixed the porch light. Perfect, she said. Shows attitude without you saying a thing. By evening I was in Mr. Alvarez's garage, packing my old tools into boxes for the storage unit I'd rented for $129 a month. He watched from his porch, hands in his pockets. That the famous grey suitcase, he asked. I laughed. Upgraded to cardboard. He nodded toward the townhouse. I heard him that night. Serve or sleep at a motel. Got it on my porch cam, if you ever need backup. I thanked him, wrote it in my notebook. Witness, Alvarez, Oct 23 Ultimatum heard. Back at the motel, Kendra's email pinged in. Copies of the florist, chef and rental charges, all traced to Evan's curated Thanksgiving. I printed them and highlighted the merchants. Rose and Root Floral, Chef Marion Events, Golden Table Rentals. The paper smelled faintly of toner and justice. Foreshadow sat right there in the ink. Thanksgiving, his stage, my audience. I bought a tiny voice recorder at Walgreens that night, not for traps, just to capture my own notes cleanly. Motel air buzzed through the vent as I pressed record. October 27th, letters drafted, evidence secured, patients engaged. Then I pulled the thumb drive from my pocket, the one with the baby monitor audio, Evan's voice saying, he'll serve or he'll sleep at a motel. I listened once more, just to remind myself it wasn't a dream. The monitor's soft hiss after his words sounded like a fuse waiting to be lit. I didn't send it to anyone. Not yet. I labeled it in the fireproof pouch, truth for later, and zipped it closed. The night smelled of cold rain and purpose. I circled November 27th in red ink and slept with the quiet satisfaction of a man pouring his foundation before the storm. October 30th came with the kind of grey drizzle that sticks to glass. I sat in the parking lot of the roadway with my coffee cooling on the dashboard and watched the time, 6:15 p.m., right about when the Bears game started. That's when the process server, a woman in a green parka with the hood up, walked up the path to the townhouse. I'd asked Rita to time it that way. Distractions make service smooth. Through the Ring camera feed, I saw her knock. Evan opened. The door mid-commercial break, beer still in his hand. The server smiled professionally and handed over the envelope. "Service of notice, 30-day termination for cause," she said. Maya's voice drifted faintly from inside. "Dad!" The doorbell chime cut her off. Click, service complete. Paper doesn't argue, it just delivers. I wasn't there to gloat. I was across town at the storage unit, numbering boxes with the black Sharpie, tools 1 of 3, files 1 of 2. Keeping my hands busy kept my temper from bleeding into the work. Every screw sorted into the right tray felt like regaining an inch of self-respect. When the server texted done, I exhaled and drove back to the motel. I logged the details in my notebook. 6:15 p.m., service complete. Notice includes clause. Revoking caretaker obligations. Witnesses, Alvarez, Ring cam, backup. I slipped the duplicate envelope into the fireproof pouch and pressed it flat. That night, I opened Evan's Instagram out of habit. His latest post showed a stack of gold-rimmed dinner plates captioned, "Hosting this year going luxe." The same plates listed on the rental invoice Kendra had flagged. I took a screenshot and filed it under Thanksgiving evidence. The next morning, October 31st, I mailed certified duplicates of the notice, one to their HOA and another to Maya's personal email address. Paper has to leave a trail, even when people don't. The post office smelled of wet wool and cheap coffee. The clerk stamped each envelope with a loud, certain thunk. I paused all auto payments linked to the house, utilities, internet, water, just like Rita instructed. Nothing illegal, just boundaries. Evan texted within an hour, "Enjoy your motel, old man." I replied once, "All future matters through counsel." His reply came back fast, a voice note, laughter over clinking glass. I didn't listen twice. Instead, I drove to First Prairie Bank and met Kendra in person. She notarized my affidavit, confirming the memorial card misuse, $18,750 in unauthorized charges. "That's a solid paper trail," she said. I told her to forward the final dispute report to Rita's office. That evening, I drafted a letter to Maya. "I love you," I wrote. "The house is not punishment. It's your mother's legacy and my roof. Respect is non-negotiable. We can lease properly or part ways." I left it in my drafts folder unsent. I wanted to see whether her conscience would speak before my keyboard did. The revenge I was building wasn't about crushing them. It was about restoring gravity. Every document, every affidavit, every signature was weight. Let the paper pull. The truth back down to earth. By November 2nd, storefronts were filled with fake snow and stuffed turkeys. Families planned menus. I planned filings. The world looked festive, but for me it was pre-battle silence. I ran my thumb over the red circle on my calendar, November 27th, and whispered, "Let the dinner be loud enough for everyone to hear." November 8th. The motel heater rattled awake just as a fist slammed my door. "Open up, Ed!" I knew that voice. I didn't move. Through the peephole I saw Evan, face pink from the cold. Coat collar popped like he was still trying to impress someone. He must have driven straight from work. His company badge still hung crooked from his belt. "Let's not play games," he said, palms on the door. You've had your little tantrum. We can fix this. I kept the chain latched and spoke through the 2-inch crack. Fix what, Evan? The notices. The lawyer nonsense. My VP's coming for Thanksgiving. I need those rescinded. You do that and we'll... He actually smirked. Let you come back. Help out. Show some family unity. I wrote his words down in my pocket notebook before. Answering, I'll let my attorney know you stopped by. Attorney. He laughed, but it came out brittle. You think a judge cares about family squabbles? You're bluffing. I closed the door. Find out, I said, his muffled voice on the other side. You'll regret this. Then footsteps, tires squealing out of the parking lot. I sat at the small desk, logged the encounter. Nov 8, 10:12 a.m. Evan Allen, verbal threat, requested rescission of termination before Thanksgiving. I underlined, before Thanksgiving. That deadline meant more to him than marriage vows. That afternoon, my phone buzzed. Maya. Dad, can we meet? We sat in a corner booth at Lou Malnati's, red vinyl cracked from years of elbows. She looked smaller than I remembered. Dark. Circles beneath her eyes. She didn't touch her salad. Please, she whispered, don't humiliate us. Evan's VP, his team, they'll be here for dinner. Just let this go. I laid the math on the table like cards. Fair rent, $2,400 a month. You've had 3 months credited already, 7,200 total, plus 18,750 in card misuse from your mother's memorial account. We can settle privately with a payment plan, or I can file it publicly after the holiday. Her hand froze mid-air, fork clinking against the plate. You'll ruin him, she said. No, I said softly. He's doing that on his own. She leaned back, voice dropping. If he loses this promotion, we lose everything. And if I lose my self-respect, I said, I lose me. The silence stretched between us like wire. She finally nodded, tears catching light from the neon. Sign in the window. I didn't push. I just handed her a napkin and said, think carefully about what kind of house you want your son to grow up in. Later that night, another text pinged from Evan, a screenshot of an email confirmation from Chef Marion Events. Subject line, Thanksgiving final prep. Head count, 14 guests. Billing, Lena Allen Memorial Card. Pending final charge. I forwarded it straight to Kendra at First Prairie. 10 minutes later, her reply, card frozen, charge declined. Merchant notified. I sat back and exhaled. One fuse quietly snuffed out. Before bed, I walked over to Mr. Alvarez's porch, hands in my jacket pockets. His yellow porch light flickered like a wink. Need a favor, I said. Keep your door open around 4 p.m. on Thanksgiving, just in case voices carry. He grinned. Always liked a good parade. Walking back to the motel, the cold smelled of chimney smoke and wet leaves. Storefronts glowed with early holiday lights. Families were pretending everything was normal. Our house wasn't. But by then I'd stopped wishing for normal. I was building justice in plain sight, and the calendar was counting down the days until everyone else saw it too. 2 days before Thanksgiving, the motel carpet still smelled faintly of disinfectant and coffee when I spotted the envelope slid under my door. No knock, no note on the outside. Just a bulge that looked like guilt in paper form. Inside, 12 crisp $100 bills and a single line written in block letters. We're square. Evan's handwriting. He thought he could buy Dignity Retail. I laid the bills out on the desk, photographed them for serial numbers, and sealed them back into the envelope. Then I wrote in my cleanest script, partial payment noted, balance and misuse remain unresolved. I mailed it certified the same hour, receipt tucked into my pouch. Paper not shouting. That afternoon I drove to Rita's office. She'd already prepared the forcible entry and detainer filing. Dated November 25th, hearing scheduled for early December. You're still calm, she observed, eyes on the signature line. I spent 40 years scheduling concrete pours, I said. Weather only delays things, she smiled. Then this is just a drizzle. We added one more letter, a cease and desist to the caterer using the memorial card. Rita's assistant faxed it, while I watched the confirmation page roll out warm. From the printer, proof hums louder than revenge. Back at the motel, I opened Instagram, habit again. Evan had posted a looping boomerang of crystal decanters, captioned, "Legacy begins at this table." I sent the screenshot to Rita. She texted back, "Judges like receipts, not captions." Near dusk, Kendra called from First Prairie Bank. "He tried another charge," she said. $3,450, listed as last-minute staffing, declined automatically. "Thank you," I said. "I'll email the decline notice for your records." When the PDF arrived, I printed 2 copies, slid them into a manila folder I labeled in thick ink, "Thanksgiving." That night I ironed my one blazer, the navy one from Lena's funeral. I polished my old steel-toe boots out of habit, force of trade. Then I wrote out 3 sentences on an index card, the ones I would use if anyone asked why I came back. "Respect is rent. I won't pay it where it's not collected. Today, I'm not here to fight. I'm here to set the record straight." I practiced, saying them aloud until they sounded like truth, not performance. The next day, November 26th, Rita called to confirm the locksmith appointment for the morning of the 28th. Legal, documented, after the notice period expired. "You're not changing locks out of spite," she reminded me. "You're just ending confusion." "I like endings," I said. When I hung up, I looked around the motel room, the neatly folded receipts, the pouch, the blazer on its hanger. Everything ready. Outside, the sky was dull pewter. Somewhere across town, my daughter was basting a turkey bought with someone else's apology, and Evan was polishing glassware for people who didn't know whose house they were eating in. He thought he'd set the stage. He didn't realize I'd built the foundation. I turned off the lamp and whispered to the dark, "Tomorrow, the truth gets served warm." Thanksgiving Day, November 27th, 3:58 p.m. The neighborhood smelled like cinnamon, wet leaves, and ambition. I carried a store-bought turkey in one arm and a manila folder in the other. The townhouse lights blazed through the drizzle, every window shouting, "We're fine." The ring cam blinked as I pressed the bell. Evan opened the door in a charcoal vest, and an actor's smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You weren't invited," he murmured. Behind him, laughter. His VP and district team circled the island, wine glasses flashing. Gold-rimmed plates lined the table like trophies. "Just dropping something off," I said, stepping across the threshold before he could block me. The smell of roasting meat tangled with tension. Maya stood near the high chair, clutching a napkin. Her voice shook. "Let him say something." Evan's grin stiffened. "Make it quick." 12 faces turned. The room hushed except for the baby monitor's soft hiss on the counter. I placed the turkey on the granite, then set the small gift box beside it. "I came to wish you a good holiday," I began, "and to return what isn't mine." Maya frowned as I opened the box. Inside sat the framed spare key, the one I'd left on their marble tray weeks ago. "A reminder," I said, "that keys only open doors built on respect." A few polite laughs from the guests, thinking it was sentiment. Then I opened the holder. "Paper always silences a room. This home," I said clearly, "is owned by the Lena Allen Revocable Trust. You've been month-to-month tenants under a family arrangement. On October 30th, you were served a termination notice for cause, disrespect and unauthorized use of funds. I'm not changing locks, not shouting, not staying. I'm simply handing copies to the people you told I was your servant." I handed one envelope to Evan's VP. The man's brow furrowed as he read. Additionally, I continued, sliding printed pages across the table, these are declined charges from my late wife's memorial card. Florist, 2008. 100. Private chef, 1,975. Event rentals, 1,240. Staffing, 3,450. Each tied to this address. Evan's face drained to grey. "You're ruining my career," he hissed. "No," I said quietly. "I'm documenting my dignity." The VP's wife whispered, "Is this a joke?" I looked toward the counter. The baby monitor still blinked. "No joke," I said, pressing play. Evan's recorded voice filled the kitchen. "He'll serve or he'll sleep at a motel." The sentence hung like smoke. Nobody breathed. Maya's hand covered her mouth. "Mr. Alvarez's door across the hall cracked open. I saw his silhouette through the window, listening. Evan lunged for the monitor. I simply stepped back and let the playback end. Then I read my 3 sentences from the card in my pocket. "Respect is rent. I won't pay it where it isn't collected. After dessert, I'll leave you to your guests." I laid the framed key on the table beside the turkey, nodded to the VP, and turned for the door. Behind me, forks didn't move. No one spoke. Only the faint creak of the baby's swing broke the silence. On the porch, rain slicked the steps. Mr. Alvarez called softly. "Good dinner?" I smiled. "Honest one." By the time I reached the sidewalk, my phone vibrated with the first missed call. The house behind me looked smaller, the kind of small that comes when truth finally fits inside it. By the time I reached the motel, the sky had gone the color of cold iron. My phone screen glowed like a siren. 13 missed calls between 7:40 and 10:15 p.m. Maya, then Evan, then unknown. I set it face down on the desk and let it ring itself tired. The quiet afterward felt earned. At 9 the next morning, November 28th, the locksmith's truck idled in front of the townhouse. The man leaned against his van, sipping coffee from a thermos. "You sure you want me to go in?" he asked. "Not yet," I said. "Wait for counsel." Rita arrived 10 minutes later, trench coat buttoned to the throat. She handed me a copy of our case filing, eviction and restitution, hearing set for December 3rd. My name printed clean across the top. Evans below, smaller. "We don't change. Locks until the judge says," she reminded me. "You just rekey after surrender. Procedure matters." "Procedure's my revenge," I said. At 10:05, Evan texted, "We'll sue." Rita replied on my behalf from her phone. "Case Dafrinaga 23 C1142 is already on file. See you in court." We heard nothing else. That weekend, Naperville hung its white Christmas lights along Jackson Avenue. The air tasted like pennies and pine. But the real sparkle came 2 days later when Maya sent a single message. A photo of the nursery and the line, "I don't know how we got here. I told her to meet me." No lawyers, no Evan. We chose a quiet cafe near the Riverwalk. The heater hummed and the coffee steamed between us. "He's terrified," she whispered, "of losing everything." "He should be," I said gently. "It's how men learn to value what they took for granted." I opened a folder and slid 2 documents across. A payment plan, $500 a month toward misuse, and a proper lease at $2,400, or a mutual move-out by December 15th with a $1,000 relocation stipend from me, if they chose to start over. "That's fair," I said. "You decide." Tears smudged her mascara. "You'd still help us?" "I'm not erasing you," I said. "I'm setting boundaries you can lean on." When she left, I stayed long enough to watch her walk out into the cold. The church bells struck 4. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel small. On December 3, I sat in a courtroom that smelled faintly of old carpet and peppermint gum. Evan showed up in a suit, half a shade too shiny, jaw tight. The judge, grey hair in a bun, read everything silently. Deed, notices, bank affidavits, the transcript of his own voice from the baby monitor. She looked up only once. "Mr. Allen, she said to Evan. "You've left quite a paper trail." Rita spoke for me. No drama, no adjectives, just dates, documents, and decimals. The ruling came crisp and short. Restitution for the misused memorial funds, scheduled repayment, a move-out date of December 12th or formal eviction thereafter, and a caution regarding further unauthorized charges. Evan's knuckles went white. On the table, Maya stared at her lap, trembling but silent. When the gavel struck, the sound was cleaner than applause. I walked out into the winter light and filled my lungs. The courthouse steps were slick with snowmelt. Rita clapped my shoulder. "Paper over shouting," she said, smiling. "Always works." By that night, the only thing echoing in my phone wasn't their voices. It was silence, the kind that finally means peace. Justice didn't come with music. It came with the sound of packing tape ripping through silence. December 10th, I parked across the street and watched movers carry out the grey sectional I'd helped them haul up the stairs last spring. The air was cold enough to bite, but clear enough to see everything. A white moving truck idled at the curb, hazard lights blinking like punctuation. The front door was propped open. Maya stood in the foyer, coat over her shoulders, hair pulled back like she hadn't slept. She caught sight of me through the window, gave a small nod. Not defiance, not shame, just recognition. Evan didn't look up. He barked directions at the movers, tried to sound in control, but his voice cracked each time a box dropped too hard. I heard him tell one guy, "Careful with that, it's heirloom glass." The irony nearly made me laugh. That afternoon, Rita texted, "Restitution plan signed, first payment January 5th, court accepted." I replied, "Understood." 2 days later, December 12th at 9 a.m., the locksmith met me out front for the rekey. The last of their belongings was gone. He handed me a new set of brass keys and an invoice for $185, which I paid on the spot. The jingle of metal in my palm sounded cleaner than any verdict. Inside, the townhouse felt lighter, walls echoing, dust still settling in the corners. The nursery door creaked open to reveal half-peeled stickers of cartoon stars and one forgotten. Rattle on the sill. I picked it up, set it gently on the shelf and turned toward the living room. On the mantel sat the framed photo of Lena I'd put there years ago. Somehow, they hadn't moved it. She faced the window again, just as she used to. I placed the framed spare key next to her picture, like a final ledger entry. My phone buzzed, 5 missed calls from Maya. I sat on the stairs and finally answered. Her voice trembled. "Dad, can we come by for Christmas dinner?" I stared at the half-packed boxes, the calm hum of the radiator, and said softly, "Let's start smaller. Sunday lunch next week. Just you and my grandson." Silence stretched, then a small exhale of relief. "Okay," she said. We picked December 21st noon, Riverwalk Cafe. After the call, I rang Rita to thank her. She laughed. "Paper over shouting works every time." That evening I carried a turkey over to Mr. Alvarez. He opened the door, eyebrows raised. "Parade's over," I told him. He chuckled, slicing the twine on the bird. "Liked your ending. Better than the bear's season," he said. I walked back home under strings of white lights and realized justice doesn't roar. It breathes. It sits quietly in your own house, with every receipt balanced, every key accounted for, every boundary finally restored. December 20th. The first Saturday I'd woken to a quiet house in nearly 2 months. No slammed doors, no Evan barking orders. Like an over-caffeinated foreman who'd never poured a yard of concrete in his life. Just the soft hiss of the radiator, the tick of the hallway clock Lena bought at a church rummage sale for $8, and winter light sneaking through the blinds, like it didn't want to disturb anything. I brewed coffee in the dented steel pot Lena used to scold me for keeping. "One day I'm going to smelt this thing into a ring," she'd say, tapping its side. I'd tell her it brewed better than any expensive nonsense because it remembered us. The smell filled the kitchen and reached into a place in my chest that had been clenched since October 23rd. I set the mug on the counter and touched the edge of the marble tray where I'd left my spare key the night I walked out. The tray was back where it belonged, not a staging prop, but a little lake of stone. After breakfast, I did the only thing I know to do when silence scares me. I worked. I tightened the pantry door strike plate that had been misaligned for years, pencil marked the hinge, shaved a whisper of wood with a block plane until the latch clicked like a good idea. I straightened a crooked cabinet handle, replaced a whining GFCI outlet by the sink, and relabeled the breaker box with my block letters, instead of Evans' looping ones. The house creaked under my steps, as if it were exhaling after holding its breath too long. The sound felt like forgiveness that didn't need words. Mid-morning, sorting the hallway closet, I found the shoebox I'd packed at the motel. Receipts, a spare phone charger, 2 unused earplugs, and the pocket notebook puffy with steam, rain, and coffee stains. The first page read in my own hand, block letters underlined twice, "Respect is the rent." I didn't know then how much I'd need that sentence. I thumbed forward through October and November. Dates, dollar amounts, merchant names, my own handwriting, getting steadier as the plan took shape. Near the back I'd drawn a tiny house with a checkmark beside it. Beside the drawing I'd written, "After the storm, inspect the foundation." It made me laugh out loud. Only a man who lived too long with concrete would write that to himself. At 11 the doorbell rang. I stiffened, set the notebook down, and checked the peephole. Mr. Alvarez stood in his green parka, a brown bakery box balanced on one hand like a waiter from an old movie. When I opened the door, cold air hugged my ankles. "Brought Patsky," he said. "My sister's a sugar terrorist." We sat at the kitchen table with coffee and donuts, dusting our shirts white. He leaned back and grinned, eyes crinkling. "That was some show you put on Thanksgiving. Quietest fireworks I ever heard." I told him the judge's ruling. Move out by December 12th, restitution filed, first $500 due January 5th. And he nodded like a man listening to a weather report that matched his joints. "Good," he said, wiping sugar with his thumb. "Some houses you fix with nails, some with paper. Either way, you do it with your mouth shut and your eyes open." When he left, I pulled a manila folder from the drawer and did what I do best. I created a clean ledger. Ledger, House and Legacy. I wrote it at the top. Inside, the deed copy with Lena's maiden name glinting like a coin, the $180 locksmith invoice, the USPS green certified mail slips clipped together, 2 ring cam stills printed on cheap paper, Kendra's emails on the declined charges highlighted and initialed, the caterer's apology for attempting to bill the memorial card, apology accepted and archived. I added a cover sheet with dates and a single sentence at the bottom, "Paper keeps memory honest." In the afternoon I walked the Riverwalk to tire out the anxiety that always wakes up when I sit too long. The river had started to ice from the edges inward, like a careful compromise. Teenagers in hoodies flicked stones and watched the ripples try to freeze mid-circle. A father in a bear's beanie lifted his daughter over a patch of slush. A gust pushed frozen leaves along the path like they'd been assigned a new job. I thought of the thin blue line of the baby monitor light, the way it had blinked like a lighthouse while I turned my respect back into law. That night I set out Lena's Dutch oven, the heavy orange one she loved, and browned onions until they surrendered, added carrots, celery, a pound of stew beef dusted in flour and pepper, a splash of cheap red wine. The kitchen filled with a smell so warm it felt like a person. While it simmered, I spread my notebook and legal pad side by side and drafted something I'd never thought a father would write. A family lease, not a punishment, a blueprint. First page. If any child or spouse lives here for more than 2 consecutive weeks, we sign terms because love isn't a currency. It's a roof. I listed chores with dollar credits, stated $2,400 as fair rent with documented credits for childcare tasks, done without mockery. Set quiet hours and guest limits. and wrote a rule I wished I'd known to write 20 years ago. No one may call anyone staff in this home. If you feel like staff, you tell me. We fix it with paper or with doors. I left a space for a signature line. Not for now. For later, maybe. Or never. But writing it made the air less tight. December 21st came grey and clear. I arrived early at Riverwalk Cafe and took the corner table by the window where the heat vent hums but doesn't rattle. I ordered a pot of Earl Grey because Lena used to say tea makes your voice kinder. Maya came in, wrapped in a grey coat with a blue knit cap on the baby, cheeks pink from the cold. She hesitated in the doorway the way you do before walking into a room where you once cried. I stood and waved like it was any Sunday since the world began. She sat. The baby swiveled toward the window and patted the glass with his tiny palm, leaving fog handprints. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, like the words would expire if she didn't spend them. "I should have. That night. I should have said—" She stopped. The apology was heavy enough without adjectives. I poured tea into a second cup and pushed it toward her. "Start with how the baby slept," I said. "Build from there." We did. Teething. A new pediatrician she likes who takes time. The white lights on Jackson Avenue. How Evan's mother, who once called me Mr. Ed like I was a sitcom, had texted an article about the healing powers of gratitude. The baby, impatient with our grown-up pacing, mashed crackers into a pattern that looked like a small continent torn from the edges of a map. When he squealed at a squirrel on the sill, 3 patrons turned and smiled as if we were a choir that hit the same note accidentally. Maya wiped her eyes and found her voice. "He's been apologetic," she said carefully, "but also angry. Mostly at himself. He won't say it that way. You know how he is. I know how people get when their reflection doesn't match the picture they printed for their friends," I said. She looked down into her tea, steam curling her lashes. "I need to be better," she said. "Not just for him. For me. For—" She touched the baby's hat like it was a ward. Can we have a way?" Her eyes lifted to mine with the same bravery she had when she was 9 and asked me to teach her to ride without training wheels. "Don't let go. I'll run beside you until your legs learn the shape of trust," I'd said then. I hesitated only, long enough to make sure the words were clean. Then I pulled an envelope from my coat. Inside, I'd printed the family lease draft, chores credited at specific dollar amounts, a rent figure, noise, guests, no mockery clauses, a 10-sentence addendum titled "Respect Practices" in big letters because people tend to behave toward big letters. She read in small sips. When she got to "No one may call anyone staff," she pressed her lips together like the sentence wanted to enter by force. "This is fair," she said. "It's grown up." She gave a small laugh that cracked in the middle. "I'd sign this." I tapped the signature line. "Not today," I said. "We don't sign anything with tears in the ink. You take it home. When you and your husband want to live as my tenants again, if you ever do, you sign together with clean minds. Or you don't. Either way, the door is open to people, not to demands. We ate soup and split a chocolate cookie because the baby insisted with both hands. When she packed him back into the stroller, she paused. "You said once that paper keeps memory honest," she said. "I thought that was cold. It isn't. It's merciful." "Mercy has edges," I said. "They keep it from spilling everywhere." We set another date, December 28th. Quick walk and cocoa, if the wind allowed. No, Evan, not yet. Not because I demanded it, but because she needed to be one voice again before we added the second and the chorus of consequences. After they left, I paid with a 20 and told the cashier to keep the coins because my pockets were tired of quarters. On the walk home, the river wore a skin of ice that cracked in tiny hexagons along the bank. A jogger in neon slipped and laughed at herself. She patted a lamppost like it was a coach who told her to walk it off. The townhouse looked different from the sidewalk, less like a stage, more like a house that had sat itself down. Back. In the kitchen, I opened the oven door and let the stew heat my face. I set 2 bowls, then put one back. Old habits and hope set too many places. I ate slowly with Lena's Dutch oven, humming soft and low on the burner. I lit the little votive she always lit, for good grace, and propped the photo of her against the salt cellar. Her smile, the one where she kept joy in the left corner for emergencies, met me at the table. After dinner, I took out a thick envelope I'd already addressed. Certified mail to Maya and Evan's new apartment. Inside, the $1,000 check for their deposit and a note that read, in my neatest letters, for the baby's soft landing. Not a bargain. A blessing. Don't confuse the two. I sealed it and clicked the peel-off strip down so hard the glue squeaked. Tomorrow I'd send it. Before bed, I stood in the doorway of the nursery. Now a box room again, walls pale blue, a single star sticker clinging in the corner like a stubborn hope. I left the door ajar, the way you do when you trust the night. But not completely. In Lena's absence, I have learned that love isn't the constant presence of a person. It's the continuous repair of what they taught you to care for. The radiator gave its evening sigh. The house settled. The clock in the hall ticked through December 20th and nudged me into December 21st. When I turned out the light, the quiet wasn't empty anymore. It was mine. January braided cold into everything. Fence wires, tree bark, the joints of old men who pretend not to feel it. On January 2nd, the mailman wedged a glossy corporate HR postcard in my box, the kind with snowflakes and words like team and values printed in a font that wears cufflinks. Inside, someone had scrawled in blue pen, "We value integrity in leadership." No signature. It wasn't important who wrote it. The sentence carried its own sender. I taped the card inside the pantry door, near the breaker map I'd redone. Not as a trophy, but as a label on the shelf where I keep better choices. On January 5th, $500 arrived in my account. No note, just the bank line. Restitution transfer, E. Allen. I didn't savor it. I logged it like a foreman checking rebar delivery. Date, amount, case number in parentheses, initialed with my own E. I made a copy of the bank page and slid it into the Ledger House and Legacy folder behind Kendra's emails. Paper isn't revenge. It's a witness that doesn't forget. That afternoon, sunlight found the dust and turned it into confetti. I took down the framed spare key from beside Lena's photo, polished the glass with the edge of my t-shirt, and set it back so the window didn't reflect my face, but the backyard cottonwood. In the reflection, the tree looked like a hand refusing to let go of the sky. I let that metaphor sit with me, like a cheap fortune cookie that somehow got the tone right. Maya texted a picture at 3:22 p.m., the baby standing without help beside the couch, cheeks furious with effort. 3 steps, she wrote. I wrote back. A photo of the framed key and the caption, "Doors open when respect walks with you." She responded with a single heart, and then, in the next bubble, "Lunch Sunday? My treat." I said yes, and made a mental note to ignore her attempt to pay, because paying for your adult child's sandwich isn't spoiling them. It's a superstition I intend to honor until they put dirt on me. On January 7th, I ran into Evan at the Jewel Osco. On Raymond, I was studying the price of stew meat like it owed me an apology when I felt presence at my shoulder. He stood with a red shopping basket and a jaw that had been clenching for weeks. We both stared at the same sticker, 6999LB, as if one of us could talk it down by sheer reputation. "Ed," he said, acknowledging me without the edge he'd spent so freely. He looked smaller without noise. Men do. The aisle smelled like bleach and oranges. "Evan," I said, "how's the baby?" "Walking," he said. "Well, falling with style." He tried a smile. It tried to become real. We stood there with Slow-cooked beef between us, like a neutral country. He thumbed the handle of his basket. HR asked me to write an addendum about the Thanksgiving night, he said suddenly, voice low. For optics, He swallowed. I left your name out of it as much as I could. He laughed in one short burst at his own stupidity and frowned. That sounds ridiculous. I'm sorry, I'm not good at this. Paper keeps memory honest, I said. It kept me honest, too, he nodded. If it helps. He stopped, then started again from someplace without performance. Thank you for not adding fire to it. You could have burned me down. He looked like a man who had found a little room in his chest that used to be rented. Out to pride and finally evicted the tenant. I don't do arson, I said. I do permits. That almost made him laugh. Then he surprised me by offering his hand. I took it because I wasn't shaking the hand that mocked me on the baby monitor. I was shaking the hand of my grandson's father, who might someday teach him to admit wrong without swallowing his tongue. We parted without promises. I didn't tell Maya, because some things travel faster than text when you let them walk. On January 10th, a white envelope arrived addressed to the estate of Lena Allen. I felt the brightness leave the kitchen for a second. A grief draft. Inside was a refund check for $219.40 from the event rental company, issued after Kendra's dispute. Apology for inconvenience, the memo line lied through its teeth. I photocopied the check front and back, deposited it, wrote $219.40 on the ledger, page under restitution side currents, and thought about how even apology has a tone, bland when it's protecting a calendar. Sunday lunch with Maya at Egg Harbor was all steam and chatter. When the hostess asked 2.5, I said, no, 3. Because a toddler is not a fraction, he is a cosmos with a sticky orbit. Maya reached for the bill at the end. I slid it under my palm. She rolled her eyes and let me win. How's the draft lease? I asked, not insisting, only checking the pulse of an idea. We read it, she said. He was defensive, then quiet, then more quiet. A smile flickered and vanished. I told him if we ever step back into your house, we come as people, not as gravity wells. She paused. He said he could sign it. Not now, but he could. That's not for me, I said. It's for the air in the room. A week later, January 17th, I met with Rita to close out a few filings. Her office smelled of lemon oil and finite patience. Restitution is on schedule, she said, tapping the line item with the tip of a pen. If he misses, we go back before the judge. For now, enjoy the piece you paid for. She slid a slim folder across the desk, color-tabbed like a science fair project. Allen v. Allen, disposition. She smiled. You built this case like a porch, no squeaks. I built it like a porch because I wanted to sit on it, I said, not because I wanted strangers to admire it. On January 19th, I took down the Christmas lights from the window, rolled them into a gentler coil than last year, and labelled the box in my square letters. While I stood on the chair, the doorbell rang. Mr. Alvarez held up a plastic grocery sack that clinked. Tamales, he said. My sister again. She is a culinary tyrant. We ate on paper plates at my table, the red sauce warming more than my tongue. He squinted at the HR postcard taped in the pantry when I got up to fetch napkins. Integrity and leadership, he read. That's just a fancy way to say, don't be a jerk when people are watching. I laughed hard enough to cough. That night, feeling useful and a little ambitious, I drew a map of the house keys on a yellow legal page, one set in my desk, one with Rita's originals, one with the locksmith's code printed and sealed in the fireproof pouch, and a note to myself. If hospitalized, give Maya one set only with signed visitor clause. It might sound morbid to some people. To me, it is love in pencil. On January 22nd, a voicemail came from the caterer, the actual chef, not some assistant, apologizing not to my voicemail but like he was talking to a person in a chair. "I didn't check the card details properly," he said. "We made assumptions because the party was loud. I'm sorry for any hurt." I saved the message to the Thanksgiving folder. Later, when I told Maya, she said, "He called me too." Then unexpected, she laughed. "He offered me free appetizers for life." We both laughed at that one, long and hard. "Tell him I want a decade of free napkins," I said. "If you're waiting for a grand reconciliation, you'll be disappointed." What we got instead was unremarkable kindness, the kind that fixes more than speeches. Maya texted when the baby had a fever. I left a bag at their door with Pedialyte, a digital thermometer, and a note. "The trick is the cool washcloth on the neck. The magic is your hand holding it there." She sent back a photo at 2 a.m. of a sleeping boy and wrote, "Magic worked. On January 27th, snow fell lazy and fat. I sat at the dining table with Lena's Dutch oven cooling on a trivet and wrote my last entry in the ledger for the month. Jan 5, $500 received. Jan 10, $219.40 refund. House sound, locks, 3 sets accounted, paper organized. Daughter, lunch X2, laughs X3, tears dried X2. Grandson, 3 steps. I put the cap on my pen and listened to the radiator's soft applause. Then I did something I had been avoiding. Because men of my generation think quiet pain is a duty, I took out a photo album, not a digital scroll. An album with plastic sheets that trapped the air of old rooms. There we were, Door County, 1999, the scuffed grey suitcase in the corner like a house pet. Maya at 7, missing teeth and proud, holding a gold paper star. Lena in the kitchen, hand on the Dutch oven, eyes saying, "Sit, you've done enough." I let the memories run, not as evidence, not as leverage, but as river water that doesn't ask permission to become itself. The final irony showed up like quiet. Company. I remembered Evan's caption, "Legacy begins at this table." He wasn't wrong. He just misunderstood what a table is. It isn't the centerpiece cost, $2,800. I have the photo of that bill to remind me. It's the ledger you write with the people you feed. It's the rule that everyone at the table washes the dish they used, not because you're staff, but because you're family and your hands know soap. It's the truth that a man can be evicted from your house by law for mocking you and still be invited to your heart later by grace if he pays his restitution and learns not to confuse the two. Near midnight, with snow muffling the street, I wrote my last note on the inside cover of the ledger, not for a judge, not for a VP, but for whoever finds this folder after my hands are done. Revenge is loud when it's young and frightened. When it grows up, it becomes a boundary and puts its feet up. I closed the folder, pressed it flat like a sleeping animal, and slid it onto the shelf beside the fireproof pouch. I turned off the kitchen light and stood in the doorway where I had once stood, with a scuffed suitcase and a hurt that felt like a country. The house was mine again, not because paper said so, though it did, but because I kept my dignity like a pilot light. It warmed the room without burning it down. When I climbed the stairs, my phone buzzed on the newel post. One more. Message from Maya. "Night, Dad. Thank you for today." I typed back, "Night. Tomorrow bring the boy over to slide on the hallway rug. I'll show him how to fall with style. That's the thing I learned this winter. You don't have to cure every arrogance. You just have to outlast it with patience. And paper. I am not the hero of my son-in-law's lesson. I am the steward of my own. So I end where I began, but straighter. I didn't lose them. I didn't win them. I set the table I could live with, paid for by a ledger, a locksmith's $185 invoice, a judge's clean sentence, and a heart that refused to keep paying a rent it never owed. You want a line to remember? Here's mine, written on a motel nightstand and proved in a kitchen with a framed key. You didn't lose me. You gave me away, and I walked home.